In 2016, the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act was passed. It's got the Florida statute number right there in Tallahassee, which created the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, but it also created opportunities that many students have never had before. We know that students with disabilities have been moving into post-secondary education, but Florida decided to really take what I think is the lead in the nation, because nationally lots of folks are calling and asking us about this act and how did something like this get passed. And I think it's whenever caring legislators really decide to put some money where students that need it the most can benefit from it. So the act is actually called the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act. And some of the things that that act did, and it's mainly 4 major things. It created the center's charge, the executive director's charge, criteria for approval as a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. It also gave a list of institutions that were eligible and the responsibilities, and then students that are eligible also. Also created scholarships. Talked about who was eligible for the scholarships, funding levels for the scholarships, and then program startup and enhancement grants. It also created, I'm going to stop right here to go over these. So the act created the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs. And if you have an opportunity, since the statute's listed there, go in and read it. It's only a couple of pages long, but whoever wrote the act was very specific in what they wanted this act to accomplish. They wanted post-secondary options for students with intellectual disabilities, and they wanted to provide funding for that to take place. So they created the guidelines for the programs, saying that it needed to be focused on employment. It needed to have some type of credential, that students needed to be on campus, and that it needed to be inclusive. It also had program startup and enhancement grants. So if a state college, university, or career technical center wanted to complete a program application, they could also complete a grant proposal at the same time to fund that program. Those grants are $300,000, and they can be from 1 to 3 years, and they can fund the startup and the development of those programs. So pretty substantial dollars to start a program. They also, on top of that, created scholarships for students to attend approved programs. So for students with intellectual disabilities, they can attend the programs, and there are scholarships for students. Those scholarships right now are $7,000 a year, divided up into the semesters that school offers, with some 3, with some 2 semesters. However, the schedule of the university, college, or career technical center works, the $7,000 is divided, and for students who it does not take the full $7,000 to be able to fund the educational portion, the student receives the remainder of that scholarship to be able to fund post-second. The student receives it. The purpose for those dollars are to help them cover some of the costs for post-secondary education that any of us that have gone on to post-secondary education know that you encounter. Gas, clothes, paper, maybe a computer. So if there's some dollars left over, the students receive those dollars to be able to support their participation in post-secondary education. So we have the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs. We have the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Startup and Enhancement Grants. There are scholarships for students, and also created the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities at UCF. Now, the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, it said what we were supposed to do, which is to disseminate information. One of the reasons I'm here. One of the reasons I travel a lot to different meetings where folks who work with students who have intellectual disabilities, or where I can get to access to families or students who are of transition age to share information. Particularly students and families. That was very important in the legislation regarding the services and supports for students with disabilities throughout Florida. Every state college and university has an Office of Disability Services. It may be called something a little different, but there's an Office for Disability Services on each campus. And it also wanted to focus on mentoring, networking, and employment opportunities. Because many of the programs, many students, as we know, many students with intellectual disabilities will need additional support to be on a post-secondary campus. So mentors are an important part of this program. Networking with employers in the community, another very important part of this program. Because the programs that are being created, students are not just having an on-campus experience. Employment is to be the goal of every program that is created, and it's supposed to be based on what are the employment needs of the community, so that employment opportunities are there for students whenever they leave the program. Not all students will leave with a degree, but a degree is a possibility, but all students are to leave with some type of a credential. And that a lot of times means working with the employers in your community to find out what are the employment needs. So for instance, if you're familiar with career tech education, and let's say in the area of automotive, there is certainly a national certification that you can get at any of the career technical centers in Florida that offer an automotive program. Along the line, there are a lot of completion points in that certification, and this looks at, okay, if a student may not be able to reach every requirement to get that national certification and pass the national certification test, what have they learned, and what could a credential, a certificate from that Career Tech Education Center say to an employer whenever they go and apply? And whether it be to, if they've just learned things that you might need to know to work at a Jiffy Lube, or what you might need to be able to do, if you were doing brake work or tire work at a shop, but maybe not all the way to the final certification that would be a national certification. So it's looking at students gaining the skills that they can gain in programs, a credential being given to the student that they can exit with and that they can use whenever they're looking for employment. So we created applications for the programs, and if you're interested in these, you're going to see our website at the end of this presentation, and on the very front page, down at the bottom of the front page of the website, there's the application is there. If you know someone that's at a college, university, or career technical school here in Florida that you think might be interested in this, please have them look at our website and look at the information. We still have dollars available. So we've administered the Startup and Enhancement Grant to 7 sites now in Florida, and I'm going to be talking about those 7 sites in just a few minutes. And we're also collecting, analyzing, and reporting evaluation data, because the legislature did not just say, here's the act, but they said, we want to know how this act is implemented, and are there changes that need to be made in this act for this to be successful. They were serious about success of this act. Be sure and grab a handout right there on the chair, okay? The scholarships, and I think that this year we have given 60, maybe it's 68 scholarships that have been given to students. Those scholarships go through the financial aid office at that institution, just like any other student scholarships would be administered. And as I said, make recommendations to state government regarding policy changes and funding needs. So, the eligible institutions. on our website, and I'm going to reference this a lot because we have an amazing webmaster who is putting lots of information, because the accountability that we have of information to provide is pretty substantial, and we're putting it on our website. But there's a list of eligible institutions under Find a Post-Secondary Program, and it is state universities, 13 I think, Florida college system institutions, 28, many of those with satellite campuses, career centers, I think there are 30 career centers in the state, charter technical career center, there are 2 of those in the state, and an independent college or university that is located in the state and that meets the requirement for the William L. Boyd Florida Resident Access Grant Program. Basically, a school that is not-for-profit, a private not-for-profit. They are eligible also. It totals about 120 institutions that are eligible to have a program. So it's from, and you'll see, fortunately, we have a program in the Keys. It can stretch all the way to Jacksonville and all the way to Pensacola. There are many sites, because we know for some students, living away from home is going to be something that they may want to do. For other students and families, being near home is going to work better for them. And so we want programs throughout the state with many different types of programs that they're offering, so students can make a choice on what program is going to meet their interests and their abilities best.
So when you say eligible, that doesn't mean they're participating. They could participate.
Correct. Yes, you're right. Yes. And we would encourage families and professionals alike to share this information. If there's a university, college, or career technical center that's near you, to make sure that we're sharing this through email and at meetings where those folks gather. But for many of them, them knowing that families would like to have this in their community is an important component, and professionals. So no, not all they're eligible, and we certainly are reaching out to them and offering support in this process, but not all have responded.
Are you going to expand to not necessarily intellectual disabilities?
The legislation was written specifically for intellectual disabilities, and I think sort of the reasoning behind that was that for students with other disabilities, there are disability resource services, offices that are on campuses that should be meeting those needs. And so this legislation was written for students who have greater needs.
Well, there's still some
I understand.
who don't have intellectual disabilities, but
like some people with autism spectrum.
So there are lots of students that may be students who are on the spectrum,
right.
who also, though, who meet the requirements for intellectual disabilities. The determination if that student has an intellectual disability is the responsibility of the institution where the program is. So if the program's at Santa Fe College determines. So I know from the folks that I work with at CARD, the Centers for Autism-Related Disability in the state, that probably about half the students that they serve who are on the spectrum also meet the requirements for intellectual disabilities.
But isn't it just strictly an IQ number?
It's not specifically just an IQ number. It's not. There's some functioning that goes along with that too. And I think that that's one of the slides right here that we're coming up on. Here we go. Be a student with an intellectual disability, as the term is defined in the federally. And the transitional age, they're talking about 18 to 26, but we have had some students that were older that have enrolled in some of the programs too. And so the programs are most times welcoming to students that might be a little bit older. The student has to physically attend the eligible institution and submit to the eligible institution documentation regarding his or her intellectual disability, such as it could be an individualized plan for employment through VR, it could be a diagnosis from a physician, or it could be a psychologist license that the report comes from, but it could also be documentation that the student brings from, what they received in the public school system through their IEP. Someone else had a question. Yes?
Well, that was part of it, because I pulled up the US code about, that was referenced, and it just says intellectual and cognitive functioning is how the
Right.
limitation and adaptive behavior
Right.
as expressed in conceptual, social, and practical adaptive skills.
Right.
Which my son, he's in regular classes in school. His IQ is in the 90s, probably. It would be lower if you just took the IQ score. They include the functionality, and his IQ's higher, based on that. He's able to function in regular classes with lots of supports. But to go to college, he would not be able to do that. So, but if you look at, based on the school system, his IEP is for autism. It doesn't have intellectual disability on there. So would he qualify?
That would be the institution's decision when looking at that. Because, many students can receive accommodations even in college, once they've worked through that disability, and they have to self-identify.
Yeah.
And they have to provide information to the Disability Resource Services Office. But this is for, this legislation was passed for students with greater needs in those areas. And so the determination of intellectual disabilities is the responsibility of the institution following the guidelines that are set forth through this legislation.
So they would be the ones that make that
Right.
determination.
They would be the ones to make that determination.
The other question I had, the career centers, is that like the workforce centers throughout the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Was that from the previous slide you were
Yeah,
saying?
it had career centers and it had technical
Oh,
programs.
That's meaning like the career technical centers. What we would mostly know as the VOTEX in the state that are oftentimes connected with school systems.
Okay.
So the application to create a program, it must focus on employment outcomes. That is the goal of this legislation, for there to be employment outcomes. An inclusive context. There may be some times that just the students that are part of this program have some type of time together, but this cannot be a fully separate program. It has to be where students are included in what's going on with other students on that campus. No less than half-time enrollment, a meaningful credential or industry certification, requires the same definition as any other students in college, which is satisfactory academic performance, and requires federal comprehensive transition program application. There is a federal application, which is called the CTP, Comprehensive Transition Program. Once an institution has decided to create a program, they have to agree to complete the application. It goes through the financial aid office, because students then who have intellectual disabilities are eligible for financial aid. And so to help support their participation in post-secondary education, they can receive Pell Grants and other funding that comes down to other students through FAFSA, which is the financial aid for student assistance. So they can complete a financial aid application just like everyone else does once the higher institution of higher education has become a CTP, a Certified Transition Program. So Florida has that funding to help them get started. Once they get started, they apply to be, and they have to send this to their accrediting agency. So it has to go to SACS, which is the Southeastern Accreditation of Colleges and Schools. And so they have to say that they're expanding their program. It becomes an official program. It's not an add-on. It's not just something that's happening on campus. It becomes a program included in their handbook and on their campus. It requires the approval of the institution's governing board. It has to be signed by either the superintendent if it's a career technical center, or by the president if it's a state university. And it also requires final approval by the Florida Board of Governors if it's a university, or through the Florida Department of Education if it's a state college or a career technical center. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, any questions about what we just, I know that's a lot of information, and I'm trying to use the correct terms so that we're using the correct terminology, and I know I'm saying the same names over quite a bit, but any questions so far? We're going to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that have been created. So, approved at universities so far, we have Florida Atlantic University down in Boca, has the Academy for Community Inclusion, and the University of Central Florida has Inclusive Education Services. So, Florida Atlantic University, it's a 2-year program with 14 courses, and it's more focused on community employment, community access, and the supported community living. The University of Central Florida started out with a Council for Professional Recognition in preschool credential, but they're expanding that, and hopefully by this coming year they'll have things in place so that there will be other credentials that are offered there also. So our 2 university programs are at FAU and UCF.
So those are the only 2 that have dorms? The ones you just mentioned, FAU and...
Are the 2 universities that have applied.
Are there any other universities that are expressing interest that say may open a program in the fall of 2019?
Southeastern University has submitted an application.
Is that public?
No, it's not, but it's a private, not-for-profit. And so it meets, like I said earlier, the William L. Boyd requirements. It meets those requirements. And so schools like that are eligible to apply for programs also.
So that's the one in Lakeland?
Right, the one in Lakeland, right.
Okay, but USF in Tampa has not, and FSU in Tallahassee has not. Can't you bring their necks?
USF expressed some interest. USF St. Pete expressed some interest,
right.
but we've not gotten, it's not going any farther than that. And I will say that FAMU is also in Tallahassee, has also expressed interest and has come to 2 of our training, planning institutes that we've had. And so they have an interest also. And I was trying to think if there was another university.
FSU is not.
They haven't.
They have a fellow there that's got a big grant to study autism, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
It has
But-
a lot of autism.
Right, but it would be great if they would. And we also have had 2 meetings with some folks at UF in Gainesville.
Oh, okay.
And so we're certainly reaching out. Because these programs do become official programs
Right.
of the institution, you have to have someone at the top that's really, that understands this and is supportive of this. And so sometimes it takes a little time to get that information to that point. But it seems like at that point, then it starts moving along.
Okay, so when they're at other places such as where you're going on your slide, they either live at home or how do they live? Because at the 2 before, you had dorms, but these places don't have dorms.
Right. And so some programs do have dorms, some programs do not have dorms.
So most of your community colleges would not have dorms.
Florida Keys Community College
Oh, it
does.
does?
Florida Keys Community College does. And so they are one. But you're right, most don't. You're right, most do not, but Florida Keys Community College does. And so at Florida Keys Community College, they have a wider offering of most of their programs and what they're looking at, what supports a student may need. And remember, this is not entitlement like the Individual Disability Education Act to a program, it's eligibility. And so they look at a student and their interest in the programs, but these are programs that they offer. And when we talked earlier about employers in certain areas of the state, as we go through, and you certainly have this list, so I'm not going to read each and every one of those to you, but there are diving, medical, technician, introduction to commercial work diving, and so diving programs in the Keys, that kind of makes sense. Lots of diving going on in the Keys, There's also marine,
Intellectual disabilities.
marine engineering. You might not have those in an area in north central Florida, but it's the program that best fits that
You
area.
actually have people with intellectual disabilities doing diving.
Right now, there's no, this is what they offered.
Oh, okay.
This is what they said, you know what, we're going to share, and we're all learning in this process. And what they said was, we want to offer all of the things that we offer at this school to the students with intellectual disabilities that enroll, and then to see where they can move in that program.
Okay, so the answer is not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
But if you look at it.
But they're not limited. But they're
Right,
not
I get
limited,
it.
which
They're
I
not
like,
limited.
which I really like, where you're not limited in just offering a couple of, some of the other programs have
But it just
just.
seems like a big liability.
Hmm?
It seems like a big liability.
But you might have people that live, that grew up in that area that dive already.
Probably so. I would imagine that in the Keys, you would find students with intellectual
Okay,
disabilities
sorry.
already diving.
Okay.
But I understand what you're saying, right? And safety is important, you know,
Yes.
and making sure that they can, they understand the safety rules. And so it's not certain that everyone will, but they're just saying these are the programs that we will offer to
Good.
students.
Yeah.
Someone else had a question. Who? Did someone else ask me a question over here? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I have a little bit of a hearing
Okay,
issue.
I'm sorry, I mean, it's very exciting, I just, I didn't know that people could, but you're saying they haven't yet.
I mean, it is very exciting, and I don't think that we would say that every student, but students that really have that interest and that aligns with their employment, whatever that employment might be, for those students, that's what we're looking at. So there it goes on into other areas, and I realize that some of these, when we're looking at students,
It's too late now. Is it too late now for 2018-19 applications? They're probably looking at 18,
For a-
2019, 2019.
for a program,
Yeah, like the Florida Keys community college.
you mean for someone to attend that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what their enrollment process is.
Okay.
You would reach out to them. It is the summer, so it may not be, but they might have a student enter in, like in January. They might do that. They will have an academically specialized certificates for being workforce ready, and that's Project Access at Florida Keys Community College. Indian River State College, over near, over on the East Coast?
It's in Fort Pierce.
Fort Pierce, thank you. I could not, I knew St. Lucie County, but I couldn't remember that's in Fort Pierce. And they have, they're not quite a year, and so they've still been in the development, but they have some students already that are involved in those, and they have a certificate for transition and exploration. And they're using occupational completion points in the areas of information technology assistance and specialized career education. Basic health care, nurse aid, statewide child care, refrigeration, and also remember that these programs are just starting, and we want to help support programs so that they are successful, and so many of them are starting off smaller, and then they're going to expand, because for many faculty that may be on that campus or supports that are on that campus, having students with intellectual disabilities is a new experience. And so they're starting out with smaller groups of students. I think maybe there are 8 students that are in the program at Indian River State College. Santa Fe College, they sort of are going to offer a wide array of different types of, from the Serve Safe food handler. They're also going to make sure that students understand health requirements for living, and they don't have a dorm housing, but they wanted to make sure that because they're on campus, understanding CPR, the rape regression defense to make sure that they are able to keep themselves safe on campus. They're also looking at the National Center for Construction Education and offering that certification, and the Certified Nursing Assistant. And that may be a little challenging for students, but there are ways with that program, and then maybe a certificate that would share what the student had learned in that program. I know that that's a challenging program, and that when we think about many students with intellectual disabilities, even with supports, not all students would be able to accomplish that, but they want to, again, offer it and students be able to move in that direction. Florida Panhandle,
That program requires a state board exam, doesn't it?
say that once again.
But doesn't the completion of that program require you to take the state board
Yes,
exam?
yes. And so we know that some students would not be able to, but they could gain a lot of skills that are taught in that program. And they would have some type of a credential to leave with. It might not be that state board, but to say, here are the things that I could do whenever they went to wherever they might go, whether it be to a hospital or whether it be to a nursing home or wherever, assisted living facility, to work, they would have the skills that they have learned. So Project Independence is at Florida Panhandle Technical College. Grow Your Future is at McPhatter Technical College, which is in Broward County. And Project Tops is at Robert Morgan Education Center in Miami-Dade County. So in the Panhandle, it's sort of like the Keys. The things that are offered there, students can participate in those if there's an interest and the student has the ability to benefit in that program. And so it may be welding, or it might be construction, or the others that are listed there. At Robert Morgan, it's a culinary arts program and also a digital design program. And students that are in Project Tops competed nationally and won some awards with different graphic designs that they had created through this program. It's really been a life changer for some of the students that have participated in that.
Where's that
And that's the creative art, which encompasses all of those classes.
Where's that one? Where's that located?
Miami-Dade.
Oh,
Okay, McPhatter Technical College, looking at a local certification in agri-science, and so they went more towards the horticulture type field and agriculture of growing things, and so that's the program that they started with there. Already had some things sort of going in at McPhatter, and those students will receive a modified agri-science certificate through the School Board of Broward County. So see, different programs have different focuses. It's sort of like, sometimes it's the strength of the center, sometimes it's the need of the area. It really needs to be a balance of all of those together. Okay. I did want to take just a few minutes and share with you about our website. And so if you visit our website, here are some of the different areas that you would see. Home gives you information. We're located in the Teaching Academy on the main campus of UCF. The About Us includes our staff and everyone that works with the center. The executive director is Dr. Paula Kohler, who is certainly a national leader in the area of secondary transition. And she was brought from the University of Western Michigan, and she's also the director of the National Technical Assistance Center at UNC Charlotte. And so she's our executive director. There's myself, the technical assistance coordinator, and a coordinator of evaluation, along with other support staff that are there. Students and families, we have lots of resources about going and moving on to post-secondary education and links to resources in the state. Post-secondary institutions, we have a list of those sites where we have Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs. We have a list of all of the programs for students with intellectual disabilities that are not our programs, but that are other options for students included there also. K-12 education, we know that our K-12 partners are very important because students need to be ready for post-secondary education. There's a certain level of independence that's going to be required, self-determination, goal setting, finding your interest, and moving in that direction. All of those are going to be all very important components for students to be ready. For many years as a special ed teacher, I know that folks thought that, once a student ages out of the school system at age 22, there really wasn't something that was there for students as far as education. Well, this act created what was next. And so students cannot be participating in the Florida Educational Funding Program, in a program that is supported by the Florida Educational Funding Program. So they must have exited school. That doesn't mean that they had to graduate with a diploma. They may not have graduated with a diploma and may still be able to enter one of these programs. Under the community page, we have a lot of different resources in the community and links to the community, events and news, and also contacts. So there's still lots of opportunities, and I'm telling you, one person can make a lot of difference once they finally find the right person to talk to, and once people really understand the possibilities. The first time, and I'm sure if you've talked with folks about post-secondary education for students with intellectual disabilities, at times folks are a little puzzled by that because they didn't know that that was an opportunity that students with intellectual disabilities had. I asked them why wouldn't they? Because a student at age 22 is not always ready for adult life. Lots of folks go on to school after age, and move on to post-secondary education at a state college, at a university, at a technical center. And there are so many valuable programs. We have seen some amazing programs for students in general here in the state of Florida. I think we have a great structure set up for post-secondary. Our state colleges are almost in every community or have a satellite campus in every community. And then we have the 13 universities. So everyone can, all of those folks are eligible to complete an application and to be approved as a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. We still have the startup grants and enhancement grants, and so there's funding for starting those programs. There are still plenty of dollars for students to receive scholarships to attend those approved programs. And then we also, to expand what we're doing, we created college and career transition clubs. So if you have a contact with a school system here in the state of Florida, what we're offering as a resource, it's not a grant, it's just a resource, is that we will offer $6,000 a year to a high school that will create a college and career transition club that includes students with intellectual disabilities, students with other disabilities, and students without disabilities, because we want it to be an inclusive club. But we all know that oftentimes students with intellectual disabilities have not been included in the college and career clubs that may have been established. Well, we're offering $6,000 a year to fund a club, and we'll do that for 2 years, and hopefully by that time the club will be established itself. But for a high school to create a college and career transition club. With that $6,000, they can pay for a club sponsor, just like any other club would pay a stipend to the sponsor. They can provide transportation to post-secondary options for students, and so if they want to take a field trip, and they can also, there's some freedom with the money. If they wanted to do t-shirts whenever they're going on a trip, just like any other club would do whenever they're going on a trip. So that's, and all they have to do is send us in a report in the summer, and they'll be funded for the second year. Every high school in Broward County applied 2 weeks ago. So I think that was 24 high schools in Broward County applied. It's not that difficult. The only signature that's required is the high school principal's signature, saying that he will oversee it, that he will maintain the budget, and that the budget will be spent appropriately, and a description of what you're going to do. So you're going to have to find club times. When are you going to meet as a club? How are you going to determine and make sure that you have students with intellectual disabilities? Because that's our primary interest, but we know that we want these clubs to be inclusive. So that they have students with disabilities, students with intellectual disabilities, and students without disabilities included. in Bay County at Arnold High School. They applied, had their first meeting, they had 56 students there. We also had a school in Putnam County, and I think at their first meeting, they had almost 50 students there. So this is a club that lots of students could benefit from. But what we want to make sure is that students with intellectual disabilities start thinking about post-secondary education, and that we know that there's someone at that school who can be there to provide them support for them to start thinking about that, and then to visit programs that have been established or are options for those students to participate in. So that's on our webpage also, down at the very bottom of the front page, College and Career Clubs. It's not a difficult application at all. And for either of these applications, if there is the commitment of that school or that district to complete these, we're there as support. We're not here as you apply one time and it's all over. We're here to say, we need to tweak this a little bit, and here's some areas that can make this even better, and then we're happy to provide that funding.
And that's for any school district in any county in Florida,
Yes. Any high school in Florida.
any high school, okay?
Which district are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm from Pasco County.
Pasco County, yes, right. So it would be any high school that's in Pasco County? Yes, we'd be happy to
Take it back.
fund a college and career transition club for them. So next week, actually, we're pulling our teams together for a Check and Connect, and we're going to talk about credentials. And we have folks from Ohio State University, there's a program there, the University of Georgia, and the University of Hawaii are going to all come in, and they're going to be sharing the programs that they have for students with intellectual disabilities with the teams that we have here in Florida. One of the things that our team said was they'd like to see what some other folks are doing outside of Florida. And so to bring from Ohio, Hawaii, and Georgia, and Georgia's a little close, but they've got a great program there. They're going to come and share their programs so that our teams can learn from what others are doing. What we really want to do is to make this dream a reality. We want to see more opportunities and options offered to students here in Florida so that we can create choices for post-secondary education. Just like people choose which university or which college they want to go to, that students with intellectual disabilities can make those same choices. Offer that range of opportunities so that Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs will become the routine. And so I want to ask you, what do families need to support successful transition to post-secondary education? What are those things that you think that they need to be able to be successful?
Information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big part.
That's a big part.
Okay, when you say that, what's the best way that you think to do that?
We're still trying to figure that out. I know working with the district has been, I mean, they're not even, and we live in a very rural area, and maybe that's part of our problem. But like the STAR program with GR, you know, we've had to tell them about that. Family members, say, hey, there's this program, you need to play behind for this first.
Right.
And so getting the information to the people who have the responsibility to provide that information to the family.
Right.
It shouldn't be going the other way.
And I can tell you, I was an ESE teacher in the high school, and I taught kids on access points, and I had kids that were gen ed, ESE, and doing IEPs at the end of the year, and dealing with transition goals and stuff. It was like when they graduated, that was it. There wasn't any connection to life after high school, and that's why I'm worried, because I have one that's fixing to be a senior. I have
Right.
one that already graduated and is in college, you know, he's making it. But like she said, as parents, we've had to look for all that. That's why we come here
Right.
to these conferences to learn that stuff.
Right.
Because our district, there's a disconnect between all the agencies, and you know, I don't even know if anyone from our district knows about this program. Chipley, where the Panhandle Education Technical School is, that's 20 minutes away from us. But we have a community college, you know, a college in our own town that does vocational programs, has technical programs.
Really?
Yeah,
And see, they could
yeah.
have one of these
They have
programs.
some of the same stuff that
Right.
Chipley
They
has.
could have a program, and they could apply, do a program application, a grant proposal, receive the $300,000, and could offer programs and could start. And it's not like you start immediately. We're there to support teams in the development and to provide
$300,000 annually for 3 years, or $300,000 for 3 years?
$300,000 that can be spread out up to 3 years, right?
Because we want to talk to you about something that we know
Okay.
this might work with, because
Okay.
we get to college to partner.
And I'm telling you, families, just like you're going to the district, that's what I'm saying, for families, to share that with the state colleges, because, Indian River State College, also Broward College is talking with us about a program also, I didn't mention their name, but both of those are 2 of the top 10 state colleges in the state of Florida that will be announced who's going to win the Aspen Award this year, which is the state college #1 award. Santa Fe College won it 2 years ago. We'll see which ones have decided to have programs. Santa Fe College, Indian River State College, and then Broward College is talking with us because they want to do that. So you see that those who are willing to move in this direction to expand opportunities and to offer more options for students are those that are being found to be, ranked highest in the state. I don't know why all programs don't see that and more folks are not. But I'm a person of change. I like seeing change, and I like seeing opportunities, and it's moving forward. It's just not moving as quickly as I would like to see, and the number of programs. Other things that families need to support post-secondary education.
I would have liked to see more at the high school level.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter just completed Project Search, and now Indian River is in the next town from us. So I'm looking at that program now, the Project Stage. But they gave us no information. I mean, it was just getting started in Indian River, but still nothing. Nothing. The high school, at every level of education, there's a disconnect. At every transition, elementary to middle, middle to high, and now high to life, there's total mess.
There needs to be more information shared. We're making sure that whenever I was last week with the special education directors. They had a summer institute. So we were there, and we try to make sure that we're touching base with special education directors from around the state to make sure that they have that information. To also make sure that the transition contacts, I'm sure that you all are aware of, that are in the district, to make sure those people have that. So we're sending the information out to hundreds of people in the state. Every time we send something out, it's going out to hundreds of people in the state. Anything else? Any questions or thoughts? I appreciate your involvement and your attention. If you have any questions, if you just want to ask one-on-one, please feel free to do that. I'm also in the vendor area in the large room on the very back in the 900s. There are little numbers on the edge, but I'm in the 900s. So if you're coming by, please stop by. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to talk with you. And once again, thank you all for attending.
Thank you.